Is this the right slide, Doctor?
Yes. So it's not only just the technology, because the space of social networks now became a place for everyday life of a lot of modern people who spend a significant part of daily time in various social platforms. But the problem of everyday life is new to psychology. I must say there were a lot of works devoted to social networks or daily daily life in social networks by philosophers, psychologists, even business managers, but not by psychologists. It's a pity because there are a lot of personal problems in each social networks. So the focus of our study was just personal problems with different social networks. And our study was include 151 people, and there were young people mainly. It was average age was 22. But the most interesting is the location in different social networks. So I must say that our people, respondents in our popular in Russia network of Vkontakte 30, Instagram 24, YouTube 45, Telegram 60, and TikTok very a lot of video and TikTok the most interesting for people. It's 31. So you can see the first of all, it was interesting what modalities are use respondents to see and to post the information. And we must say that there were mainly, as you can see, more than 40, 74, 60, I suppose, percent of people use one modality. It's digital modality. And this modality is to share their meanings in or hymns, not visual of, and only some of them use two modalities, and it's always the common option is auditory and digitally. And so you see that digital modality is even is the main, even if they use two of them. And the most interesting is the people who prefer different networks, and personal differences between three networks of contacts, TikTok and YouTube. Personal characteristics are rather similar, and they very much differ from those who use Telegram and Instagram. The most interesting differences on three scales. It's a social courage, self-esteem, and exhilaration. they all indicators on these three scales are higher on those who use Telegram and Instagram, and they are statistically significant. And you must see that for us it was logical that self-esteem and exhilaration are higher for users in Telegram and Instagram. But the data of social courage must be see further. We have more data to understand how it is connected to social courage, because it was not a full data and we didn't assume this. You see, uh, it was also interesting the oh,
Is this the right slide,
yes,
doctor?
yes. Uh,
Please comment me to move the slide, like next slide.
yes.
Okay, doctor.
Mhm. And now, it was very interesting question for us. What are the purpose of using networks? And it was assumed before, and it was proved that the main purpose was entertainment. Uh, and this purpose was for all this regarded the choice of resource or for obtaining information. So Instagram, TikTok, Telegram, and others mainly like to have films, Netflix series, music, and so on. So nearly more than a half of people for prior use these for entertainment. But what is not clear for us before, they want on the second place was the purpose of obtaining of information. You see, we supposed that the second place after entertainment will be communication, because the oral wishes were we want to see each other, to communicate, so on, so forth. But in reality, the fact was that on the second place was the search of useful information. And we assume that this fact was mainly due to that point that not far ago it was a pandemic situation, and during this situation, a lot of people decide and began to search uh, mm, useful information about situation, illness, methods of prevention. And we must say that such information was actual even for youth, and the elderly people began to search and classify this information, and it was new for them. But this motivation to search and to classify useful information remains after ending, ending of the quarantine. Uh, and maybe because the information remains actual for many of us. So the communication was only on the third place. but it was the most important for those respondents who use for contact platform. And we must say that this fact must be for a special attention for psychologists and teachers. They must analyze the seems motivation for bullying in social networks, just familiar for mainly in contact users. And we must also say that the data also uh, showed that the people who spend much time on social networks are characterized by openness and social self-esteem skills. So exhilaration and openness exhilaration and openness were assumed before. Of course, it's a logically data, but it was not obvious about the high self-esteem. And you see a lot of time spent on social networks have uh, high indicators on exhilaration, it's logical, and low on self-esteem. And it's a dangerous data. And we also think that we must, of course, say it further, but we think that just in online communication, many users hope that they will be able to rise their self-esteem. Not in reality, it was not very hard for them, but they want to do it on online. And it was interesting that we see the positive correlation between age and softness. It's also logical because many people begin more softness with age. So we must say that it was a very interesting fact and a very, I must say, some dangerous fact that it was must be interesting even for clinical psychologists that no. Mhm. That the respondents who spend a lot of time on social networks have a very high fair scores. So they are inclined to fair in reality and in online communications. Uh, this data can be regarded as an important diagnostic indicator, and it must be regarded as a fact that they also inclined not only to fair but to publicity demonstration of their social status and some even perfectionism. Social status, we think that as the same with some self-esteem, they want to rise it and to demonstrate themselves even on online communication because they sometimes are unable to do it in reality. We must also say that despite the lot of visual communication, uh, um, visual content, the most users use not visual but digital modality, sometimes accompanied with speech. And it must we think that this is very important fact that say they I can't they grow cognitively. So it can be so sad because digital modality is no, more mm, interesting for them than real visual modality. So uh, we must take into account that when we want to uh, presentate significant information, it must be not visual, but themes or uh, meanings. Uh, we must also say that was an interesting fact that Instagram and Telegram users have more interested in information, and we think that it is compared with that they have a very high educational level, the PhD and university degrees, and we don't have on such educational level on uh, uh, different Telegram, TikTok, and so on. So since the period of quarantine, the problem of digital society, and especially digital everyday life, those technologies, gadgets that have became a familiar instruments in our life, and we um, don't have see uh, people who don't use gadgets, and some people don't have a fear to lack the contact with their gadgets, and it is a new option for us to understand what fears are compared with the lack of gadget in the hand. And so also uh, the characteristic differences between Instagram and Telegram and other users might we must think understand that this information make it possible not only to understand the peculiarity of their lifestyle, but also partly to predict their behavior and emotion experience in response to stimuli of a different nature. So these parameters can be used both for diagnostical purpose and partly in psychotherapy. Uh, thank you for it, for your attention, and sorry for some.
This year. So I recommend everyone to see this paper when they have enough time. Uh, this paper is entitled "On Tesla-Inspired Extended Quantum-Holographic Framework for Reprogramming Macro-Quantum Correlations of Individual and Collective Consciousness." I'm coming from the Faculty of Electrical Engineering. I'm a retired professor, uh, where I teach several courses in material science, uh, biomaterials, biophysics, information, quantum information, also on nanomedicine. Uh, this paper, can we get the next slide? Next slide, please. This paper is organized as follows. In section 1, we introduce motivation for studying introspective evidence of Tesla's transpersonal creative communications in his meditative altered states of consciousness and extended quantum-holographic quantum gravitational clue for improving epigenetic strategies for integrative medicine and transpersonal psychology. That is introduction. Then in section 2, we focus on some related psychosomatics aspects of quantum entropy and entanglement and consequences on the usual observable biological error of time and spiritual informational time reversal. Very important point. In section 3, we consider spiritual implications on free will and individual and collective consciousness reprogramming. And in section 4, we conclude that Tesla's overall research can be an inspiration for reconsidering global educational, informational, political goals with reorientation to holistic subtle actions for solutions of global society. Next slide, please. Well, this is introduction part with Tesla's legacy for the new millennium, with his introspective evidence of transpersonal creative communications he was using in his discoveries during all his life. It's very important, and this provides a clue for deeper understanding of biophysical basis of creative processes, known also in ancient Vedic knowledge and related to transpersonal interaction with the deep level of consciousness called Ritambhara Pragya, described in Patanjali Yoga Sutras and literally meaning when mind perceives things as they are. It is related to our Tesla's communication from his individual level of consciousness to global level of collective consciousness related to this written Bara Pragya level of consciousness on the, in the framework of this consciousness picture known in Vedic tradition. Next slide, please. His insights could also provide, and this is our contribution, scientific, additional extended Hopfield-like macroscopic quantum-holographic and quantum gravitational framework for more local psychosomatics. This is the point of our paper, actually. Based on systemic decrease of quantum entropy and macro-quantum correlations of acupuncture system and individual consciousness, which they are closely related in this model, and collective consciousness, which may provide clue for improving epigenetic strategies for integrative medicine and transpersonal psychology, based on methods and techniques for decrease of quantum entropy and macro-quantum correlations of acupuncture system for individual consciousness and collective consciousness. Next slide, please. According to our quantum-holographic quantum gravitational theoretical framework, spontaneous transpersonal communications with exchange of information in transitional states of consciousness will have negative psychosomatic spiritual effects, giving rise to global transgenerational increase of psychosomatic loads on the level of quantum-holographic network of collective consciousness, which might represent the sin karmic engine of history. All forgiving prayer to ourselves and others, relatives, enemies, disease, might be only phenomenon which decreases these loads, while simultaneously vacuum excited, spiritually purifying new macro-quantum portions of vital energy, similar to spiritually excited and mentally channeled Ayurvedic, Qigong, Reiki, and modern experiences of local and transpersonal healing in prayer-related persons. As quantum gravitational, non-stationary, indeterministic, purifying interventions in unitary intrinsic quantum holographic stationary evolution of collective consciousness. So within our quantum holographic quantum gravitational framework, it is plausible to consider healthy psychosocial state of a quantum system of consciousness is the simplest informational state of lowest quantum entropy, with simple single memory state, and disordered next slide, please. And disordered states are related actually to existence of many local minima apart from this deepest minimum which is related to healthy state. It is possible to have any one of us a lot of side minima related to some disorders in our psychosomatic system. So in all these therapies related to integrative medicine or transpersonal psychology, we are actually focusing on this side minima, so-called memory attractors in this picture, to resonantly activate them, thus emptying their energy and put their energy in this lowest, deepest state related to our healthy state. So this way we are removing these disordered memory attractors. If we do this for every memory attractors, actually there are many of them which can exist within our psychosomatic systems. We are deepening this basic memory attractor of the healthy state, while all other memory attractors are disappearing. Then we are left, theoretically, with only one deepest state, which is related to pure state of our healthy state. Next slide. Next slide, please. So if we consider entropy of our system, in the case of entropy of pure healthy state with only one minimum of our psychosomatic system, this state is characterized with probability equal to 1. This is the lowest state with entropy equal to 0. This pure quantum state provides maximal possible information about quantum psychosomatic system, while entropy of mixed disordered states of psychosomatic system describes are full about superposition of all these minima presented previously in this figure, would be greater than 0, as mixed stochastic state provides incomplete information about quantum psychosomatic system. Thus, in this quantum holographic framework, psychosomatic healthy state is the state of minimal entropy, while psychosomatic disorder state is the state of increased entropy. So application of psychosomatic therapies naturally decrease entropy or degradation, or increase information or organization of macroscopic quantum psychosomatic system. With spiritual information of time reversal. It's a very good point, because our quantum entangled system, entangled with our environment of other consciousnesses, might be related to quantum entangling experiments with time reversed consequence. So quantum history observed may be retroactively changed. We act now in present uh, they are actually uh, they are actually activated in the past. They are essentially affected retroactively our system of information, which is related to even to our past experiences or experiences of our predecessors on the level of collective consciousness. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What are spiritual implications of free will and individual and collective consciousness reprogramming? In the context of predestined transgenerational cosmic quantum hologram collective consciousness, in a deep psychotherapeutic terminology, the possibility of its reprogramming by spiritual purification would be reduced to disentangling or unbinding from almost all levels of individual and collective consciousness, and consequently to full reintegration of the higher self by its reunion with spiritual primal source, with previous mentally controlled systemic spiritual decreasing of macroquantum relations of individual and collective consciousness. This might leave more room for free will and the influence of future persons, making the role of every person indispensable due to the influence concerned for collective mental environment, as elaborated in reference 14. Yeah. On these lines, holistic rule for healing boundary conditions in energy state space of the acupuncture system, individual collective consciousness should be taken into account with significant psychosomatic implications on necessity on three front lines of psychosomatic integrity medicine. Collective consciousness, one, second, acupuncture system and individual consciousness, and third, somatic level. It should be pointed out that necessary activities in second and third levels, but neglect of the first level of collective consciousness would result in further transpersonal transfer of memory attractors on the level of individual collective consciousness in these and future generations. So this implies a necessity to focus on origins of many psychosomatic problems on underlying prenatal transgenerational levels. Particularly, we can mention South American ayahuasca tradition and Nigerian Abiko tradition, or Hawaiian Ho'oponopono tradition, or word bestseller of Anita Mujani, or spiritual teaching of Bruno Greng, is actually demonstrations how we can actually reprogram individual correlation with collective consciousness. This greatly contributes to our understanding that even most difficult psychosomatic disorders have their roots in the energy information blockages. That healing begins by removing them. First, lovingly to ourselves, accepting ourselves, and forgiving ourselves, which is then manifested by love to others and acceptance of others. By spiritually disentangling or unbinding repentant, forgiving prayer. Thus, civilization, via synthesis of scientific knowledge in the field of consciousness and millennia experiences of the spiritual traditions, would contribute that new millennium would be characterized with wisdom. This is wrong. This process could be played by all the religious community, cultivating a true spiritual moral and absolute interpersonal, interethnic, and interreligious tolerance as a measure of individual behavior from the perspective of that. And this amount of generated and non-reprogrammed psychosomatic conflicts until death, which determines the spiritual evolution of the soul and the disease, as well as preferences of the individual and collective future of the descendants, that can be significantly altered only by collective prayer for our neighbors and enemies and consequently individual and collective conscious recovery. It is possible only by prayer. Next slide. slide. In conclusion, in this data-inspired paper, we considered some extended quantum-holographic taxonomic aspects related to quantum entropy and disentangling, and consequences on the biological era of time and spiritual information time reversion. With final discussion of future information implications on free will in individual and collective consciousness and program. So by prayer we can reprogram all those things related not only in this generation, but also in the previous generation. In the wider context, Tesla's overall research can be an inspiration for reconsidering global educational and information political goals, with the reorientation to holistic subtle actions for solutions of the global society. Acknowledgement for party finance board of 7 years of education, science, and technology development. Next slide. This is the reference list. I suggest you also to consider. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. This is my book, on integrative biophysics, quantum medicine, and quantum-holographic mathematics. Psychosomatic cognitive implications. I suggest you to help it. It's available on my website. Next slide. These are quantum informational biomedicine and quantum mathematics relationships and perspectives. Now, quantum information is very modern science. Also, these are relations with quantum information with quantum holographic neural networks, which are actually a part of this paper, and quantum information biomedicine also. Next slide. This is my CD, so you can see it. Next slide. Other books also, like the family. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. And thank you for your attention.
In Portugal, near Lisbon, actually in the south bank of the Tagus River. We attend an area of 350,000 inhabitants. I also have a law degree, but I don't have any legal practice. And today I'll speak to you about assessing decision-making capacity in a clinical population. This is a brief summary of my presentation. I will begin to address some general principles and definitions. Then I'll explore the role of psychiatry in decision capacity assessment, how to assess capacity and the different dimensions that we have to explore in order to make a clinical judgment. Then I will review some instruments used to help us in this assessment, as well as some, and finally, we'll discuss what to do when a patient lacks capacity. So let's start by addressing what is decision capacity. Decision-making capacity is the ability to make an autonomous choice. And an autonomous choice has to respect three premises. The person who decides not only understands the information given to him, but is also capable of making an independent judgment. And there is a lot to say about what is an independent judgment. Within his value system, assessing decision-making capacity is an essential task in any clinical practice. Making clinical decisions and involving patients on it is our everyday practice in hospitals. Here we have some examples of tasks that require adequate decision-making capacity related to our clinical work in hospitals. For example, consent or refuse treatment, consent or refuse diagnostic procedures, consent or refuse participation in clinical practice, to be discharged on request, for example. But the first two are very important because for each treatment, for each procedure, the medical doctor should obtain an informed consent. An informed consent is not just an ethical duty or a patient's right. Sometimes it's a legal obligation, and sometimes written consent is requested for some procedures. Actually, decision-making capacity is one of the two preconditions of an informed consent. The other one is the voluntariness. So every time a patient has to give an informed consent, the medical doctor or the nurse have to ensure that the patient has an adequate decision-making capacity to that particular choice that he has to make. So let's go on with some brief definitions. What is a capacity? Capacity is an ability to perform a given task, which necessarily involves a minimum cognitive and behavioral functions. The assessment of a capacity is a clinical task. It refers to a state. A competence, on the other hand, the competence is determined by a court. It's a judicial decision based on a previous one. It is not referred to a state, but is a legal right to act. It's static. It requires a new process, a new evaluation if we want to change some competence. The capacity is not a state, it's dynamic. Okay, so decision capacity, the capacity assessment is specific to a given and a unique decision. It is not global. It is not necessarily stable over time, and it is not assigned based on diagnosis. One diagnosis is not automatically equivalent to an inadequate decision-making capacity. There are several factors influencing decision-making capacity. The main factors are, the first of is the level of education. That's why we should adapt an evaluation test to the level of education of our patient. The second one, it's the major factor actually, the cognitive function. This is affecting cognitive functions, put the patient at risk of diminished decision capacity. And there are other factors that can influence, that can interfere with the decision process, compromising it or not. For example, if I don't sleep enough, my decisions in the next day can be interfered by sleep deprivation. If I'm in love, actually acutely in love, that state can interfere with my decision, but it won't compromise it. That's a very different, important difference, and we are looking for factors that compromise our decision-making capacity, that may or not interfere with my decision, but won't compromise it. Cognitive factors, functions are the main factors that can compromise decision-making capacity. Assessing decision-making capacity is available to any clinician. The priority should be given to the attending physician. There are conditions. There are some conditions that they may require the involvement of the liaison psychiatrist or an expert in decision-making capacity assessment, like the presence of suspicion of mental neurological illness, or when we are dealing with clinical complex cases. And what are complex and controversial cases? Complexity is related with the seriousness of the likely consequences of the decision. It's necessary to weigh up the risks and benefits of one decision. High-risk decisions with negative consequences require a higher standard of decision-making capacity versus low-risk decisions. So, we should add an extra principle to our list of principles. Decision-making capacity will span throughout the spectrum from adequate decisional capacity to inadequate capacity, or on the other hand, clearly capable patients to clearly not capable patients. in between are cases of marginal capacity. They are the most complex cases to deal with. How can we assess capacity in our patients? The way we assess capacity nowadays is based in this seminal article in this field written by Applebaum and Grisso in 1988. It's still very relevant and up to date, so it's worth a read, and I will suggest this article to everyone who is listening to me. Applebaum and Grisso, these authors told us that decision-making capacity, it's not revealed by any psychiatric or physical diagnosis by itself. It's actually a multidimensional construct. It implies a combination of three distinct pieces of information: clinical information, assessment of the functional capacities involved, and the particularities of the specific situation that we are dealing with. Finally, these authors theorize that decision-making capacity should be evaluated by 4 criteria. These are 4 key decisional abilities inside the decision-making capacity that should be evaluated in a face-to-face interview: expressing the choice, understanding the information received, appreciation of alternatives, and the reasoning process. Prior to the interview, any examiner should be versed in facts that of the specific decision, should review the patient's medical record, and should identify previously conditions that could raise the likelihood of impaired capacity. So in this slide, I'll show you how to assess each of these criteria, followed by some example questions. They are all open-ended questions that you might use or not with your patients. As you'll see, the examiner should have a good range of knowledge about that particular person, medical knowledge, and also personal history knowledge. So we can speak with the patient, speak with some relatives of the patients, to have a good range of knowledge about the person. Starting by the first criterion, expressing a choice, actually is the ability to say yes or no, regardless of the means used. An example question is, what was your decision? Patients who are not able to do this are immediately evaluated as unable to decide. On the other hand, a simple expression of a choice does not mean adequate decision capacity. Frequent reversals of choice may indicate lack of capacity. Second criterion, understanding. We are speaking about understanding the nature of the disease, the nature of the benefits and risks of the plan that is proposed to the patient, the alternative approaches, the consequences of a non-adherence. We can ask, tell me in your own words what your doctor told you before. Very important to adapt information to the patient's education and cultural level. Cognitive deficits are the main factor that makes very difficult to understand information for the patient and can decide that the patient is not, that it has not an adequate decision capacity. We should ask ourselves if there is enough time to the patient assimilate sometimes very complex information about a disease or about a plan, a treatment plan. What is shared, and was it shared and discussed by the patient with his or her family? It can help the patient. Did he sometimes, when the psychiatrist or the expert is speaking to the patient still have doubts about information that was previously transmitted by the assistant team? The next criterion is appreciation alternatives. So what is the impact of the facts that was previously transmitted to the patient in his life, in his context, in his personal history and values? We can ask directly, what impact does your illness have on you? What impact will these treatments that are proposed to you will have in your life? What is the meaning attributed by the patient to the information received? how does the patient integrate this information in his value system and personal history? We can have the interference of psychopathological, cultural, and other maladaptive factors that can interfere or compromise decision capacity. Beliefs that will compromise decision capacity tend to be unrealistic, illogical, and distort reality. Can tend to result from impaired cognition, disturbed affects, and not from previous values and previous personal history, and tend to be directly relevant to the treatment decision. Finally, reasoning. We are speaking about the ability to compare options. There are some determining factors in decision, and if there is or not consequence of the decision told us by the patient. What is the reason for your decision? Why did you take this decision? Are example questions. We should ask ourselves, does a patient make a logical and rational use of all information in the selection process? This evaluation is more focused on form than in content. Complex issues, cognitive deficits, anxiety, intense emotions can interfere in this process, and the evaluator can help structuring thinking. We are not just evaluating our patient, we can help him. So the result of this assessment, we should know this is not absolute, it's specific to a given medical act in a given moment, some particular moment. It will exist or not in a particular clinical condition at a particular moment. It can be revoked. It's a dynamic state. We should be aware of this. Decision-making, speaking now about the instruments that can help the evaluator, before I should reinforce that decision-making assessment is a clinical task. So instruments can be used to provide some help. They can provide a semi-structured interview, and they should have a good interrogator reliability. They are not used in the routine care. They are used in some complex case and on investigative ground. The MCAT, the MacArthur Competence Assessment Tool for Treatment, is perhaps the most clinically applicable instrument. This instrument and the training video are available for purchase from the publisher. It's a semi-structured interview. You should know the clinical information to apply it. There are some questions that will evaluate those criteria that I told you before. It receives different punctuation according to the adequacy of the answer, and we'll have a different punctuation on the end that will help us guiding if the patient has or not enough ability to make their decisions. Another instrument that can help the evaluator is the mini mental state examination. It can be used in elderly patients with some degree of cognitive impairment. There is some correlation with assessment of decision-making capacity. Applebaum told us in 2007 that a result superior to 23 is highly probably correlated with being capable. Under 19, there is a high probability of not being capable. So, and we'll finish in some moments. What do we do when a patient lacks capacity? We have to consider a replacement decision, and the degree and urgency in a replacement decision will depend on the expected duration of the impairment, the severity of the impairment, and the seriousness of the decision. On the other hand, we won't need a replacement decision, whether remission of the disability is expected, so we should invest in the treatment, whether psychiatric or neurological illness affecting cognition or a judgment, we will wait for the therapeutic effect of the appropriate treatment, whether the patient is just reactive, there is some reactive fear and anxiety in condition the acceptance of the plan. So, for example, we should involve the family members, friends, or whether people with mild to moderate cognitive impairment not expected to fluctuate, so we should benefit for more intensive efforts at education to improve understanding. This is very relevant to hospitalized patients because treatment of the underlying cause, for example, of the delirium, could restore or may restore decision-making capacity. If the inability to make decision persists or is severe enough, we should seek out a substitute decision. Surrogate decision maker should ideally be chosen by the patient in advance or advance directives for healthcare. In the absence of a designated surrogate or advances directives, laws may vary from country to country in terms of which people can serve in this proxy role under hierarchy. In general, the order is the spouse, about adult children, parents, siblings, and other relatives. Proxy should take decisions based on patient's preferences or, lacking knowledge of this, patient's best interests. Sometimes a formal guardianship may be important. It will be assigned by a judge based on a legal determination that the patient is decisional incompetent. We know that is rarely necessary, but it can be used for major clinical dilemma in a patient who is not capable to make decisions, when there is no healthcare surrogate and when there is multiple first-degree relatives that cannot agree, or those who are next to the patient are acting clearly in their self-interest and not in the patient's best interests. Another possibility, when the inability persists, but we are facing an urgent replacement decision, we'll look for advanced directives in the form of a living will or a previously appointed surrogate decision maker according to each country's law. In the absence of this, and in an emergency scenario, we can act under a presumed consent. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you a lot. I've finished.
Migration scholar in Portugal, and I will present my work about the perceptions of social support and social capital as social determinants of mental health, COVID-19 personal networks of immigrants and non-migrants in Portugal. So migration is a disruptive process in which migrants have to rebuild their social networks, adapt to a new culture, and cope with several distresses. Enduring events like the pandemic, migrants have to face a double disruptive events, which amplify the challenges imposed by the migratory process, which potentially impacts immigrants' mental health. So in order to explore immigrant social networks and immigrant social capital, an approach that has been used is the egocentric network approach, which allows us to explore the social capital according to Putnam perspective on social capital bonding and bridging, and according to the social capital perspective of birth through the structural wholes approach. For instance, on your left, we have a network where each individual is interconnected in this network, which means it's a network usually where immigrants usually have networks with family ties. With immigrants, it's a closed network, which means it's a network which circulates bonding social capital, incorporates strong ties, has less structural holes because every individual is interconnected in these networks. And usually the information that circulates in this network is redundant information. On the other side, we have a network where individuals are not interconnected. Usually is a network where migrants have connections with non-migrants, and the social capital that circulates in this network is bridging social capital, is a network with more weak ties, has more structural holes because the network is not all interconnected, and the information that circulates in this network is non-redundant information. This type of network that incorporates more bridging social capital and more structural holes is more beneficial for immigrants because they have access to more information, to diverse information, which facilitates their trajectory in the host country. So when it comes to the studies of the social networks, the majority of studies have used a general approach, which means they ask the participants to elicit the authors, the individuals to which they talk about general matters of their life. But if we want to explore the impact of networks on individuals' mental health, it's necessary to use a more specific approach to incorporate the ties that really has an impact on individuals' health. So it's really important to consider or to have a more specific health approach to capture in the health network ties. For instance, in our study, we asked the participants to mention the people to which they talk about their health problems, collecting their health networks, focusing on their health-specific networks. And when it comes to the impact of social support on mental health, on their networks usually circulates the emotional support that is usually provided by their close ties, and the instrumental and informational support that is usually provided by weak ties and more open networks. And when it comes to the social networks, an indicator of the social support of individuals is the network size, which means that if the individual has a bigger network, usually has access to more emotional and instrumental support. And also there is a lot of, the many studies usually consider social capital and social support as the same. While social capital is the resources that circulate in a network, social capital is more associated with specific resources like having access to emotional, instrumental, and informational support. And usually social support is a component of social capital, with both being relevant determinants rooted in social networks that help individuals face adversities in their lives. And research on social capital and mental health is still sparse and contradictory. When it comes to social support, also the results have been contradictory, indicated that social support as a buffer against anxiety and depression, for instance, protecting immigrants against schizophrenia. And there is other studies that indicate that when solely provided by members of the migrant culture of origin, it can contribute to higher levels of stress and depression. So when it comes to the migration field in Portugal, immigrants face more challenges when seeking help and accessing the healthcare system, for instance, lack of information on access to health services. Brazilians are more prone to mental health problems, and it is the biggest immigrant group in Portugal when compared to African immigrants. In specific, Brazilian women suffer from precarious work conditions, are more vulnerable to exploitation, stigmatization, affecting their mental health and quality of life. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, Brazilians changed their social networks by increasing their contacts with people from their origin country to cope with this disruptive event. So for this study, we aim to understand how networks overlap and how mental health and social support perceptions changed before and during the COVID-19 pandemic, and to address how changes in health networks are clarified by social ties patterns, network efficiency, and social capital. So in our study, we incorporate 53 non-migrants and 18 in CPLC immigrants from the countries from Portuguese language, countries that speak the Portuguese language. And we verified that those living less than 2 years in Portugal had less levels, where the levels of mental health were lower when compared to those living more than 2 years. And we also verified those levels decreased during the pandemic. And we also verified that non-migrant population had more social capital. And when it comes to the overlap from before to during the pandemic, the overlap were lower on the immigrants, which means that they had more unstable networks as their networks changed from before to during the pandemic, which makes them more vulnerable to mental health issues. So as a procedures, we collected two social net. It was a retrospective study, so we collected their networks, their health-specific networks before and during the pandemic. We collected their sociodemographic data, and we also we had an egocentric network questionnaire asking the participants to elicit their health-specific networks, their health-specific ties. And we also asked the participants to characterize each member of their network and the interconnections of their networks to be able to explore the social determinants of health. So we were able to verify that both CPLC migrants and non-migrants perceived similar levels of mental health before the pandemic. And during the pandemic, the perceived levels of mental health of both groups decreased, but was more pronounced for CPLC immigrants. And we also verified that the overlap between health networks before and the pandemic was less for the immigrants, which means their network were more unstable, and non-migrants were more, the non-migrants networks were more stable, which means they had more social resilience than when compared to the immigrant population. We also verified that CPLC migrants network overlap on perceived mental health during the pandemic was particularly relevant for migrants. And we also verified that the perceived availability of social support during the pandemic was also relevant for CPLC migrants. When it comes to non-migrants, we revealed that overlap on perceived availability of social support during the pandemic was actually not relevant. And we actually were surprised to verify that bigger networks for non-migrants, which means more social capital, social support, was associated with lower levels of mental health. We also verified that during the pandemic, CPLC migrants network changed and were less efficient, became more homophilic, which means that they started to incorporate more immigrants in their networks. The network efficiency was positively associated with heterophilic ties, and there was a positive association between social capital status and heterophilic status. The opposite was verified for non-migrants. During the pandemic, we verified that non-migrants network slightly increased their efficiency, which was actually a surprise as well. And they remain homophilic during the pandemic, which means that they didn't start to incorporate more immigrants in their networks. They remain still with the non-migrant ties. So summing up, immigrants have lower levels of mental health than non-migrants during the pandemic. And these changes are due to changes in their social networks that inhibit their efficiency and mobilization of social capital, mainly bridging social capital, which means that during the pandemic, their networks lost non-migrant ties, the bridging social capital, and also the networks become more close with less structural holes, which means that their social resilience was weaker, which means that made them more vulnerable to mental health issues. So future studies should continue to study the social networks, because social networks are dynamic and the migratory experience is continuous. Thus, a longitudinal approach could enhance the knowledge of this subject. We actually have already did this. We did a longitudinal study after this one. Future research should consider the length of residency and the type of migratory experience, because this was not a study with refugees. So probably refugees, the result could have been different. Probably their social resilience is lower when compared to the immigrants that were in this study. Analyze the composition of networks and the types of social capital that can be accessed because the benefits of bonding/bridging social capital, and the structural holes theory, and studies regarding the relationships between informational support and the structural holes theory. And that's it. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Professional master degree in public health at the same university, which resulted in a search study that was published last year and is the subject of this presentation. My article is about coping strategies of health professionals from Piracicaba during the COVID-19 pandemic. And my advisor was Professor Dr. Antonio Carlos Pereira.
Dr. Allen, I'm so sorry for interrupting. Could you please move your slide? Like we can see the third slide, but you are presenting second slide, I guess. So kindly give slideshow.
It's okay?
No, it's not moving.
No?
No.
Let me see. One moment. That's okay?
No. For example, kindly click on slide number 1.
It's slide number 1.
Yes, click on that. Yes, you shall do it like this as well. And slide number 2.
Okay.
No, here it is not moving. Click on slide number 2, please. Now the slides are not moving.
Change.
Yes.
Okay, number 2. Okay.
Yes, perfect. Yes.
Thank you. Well, the COVID pandemic was declared by the World Health Organization in March 2020. The main safety measures were social distancing, hand hygiene, and the use of masks. In Brazil, primary care is the main entry point of the Unified Health System, SUS, whose objective is to provide comprehensive care, playing a strategic role in the identification, notification, prevention, and management of youth care, based on the principles of territorialization, humanization, and continuity of care. The family health program has been established as the main model of primary care, composed of multidisciplinary team with territorial, collective, and individual family dimensions in comprehensive health care aiming at resolute practice according to the demands of the territory. Well, the stress can cause physiological, psychological, and behavioral changes, which can lead to mental and physical illness. When faced with a stressful situation, the individual needs to go through an adaptation process to deal with the new situation, whether positive, marriage, for example, or negative. Coping with a stressful situation is defined by Folkman and Lazarus as a cognitive assessment that the subject makes when faced with a situation perceived as threatening. Subsequently, he evaluates which resources and options are available for coping, which refer to his psychological, physical, material, and spiritual resources. There are two main coping strategies: emotion-focused coping and problem-focused coping. Emotion-focused coping, there are techniques used to regulate emotions and reduce feelings of discomfort or distress. How to meditate. And problem-focused coping, there are efforts directed at modifying the situation, looking for situations to eliminate the stressful situation, looking for solutions, solutions to eliminate the stressful situation. The objective. The objective of this study was to evaluate the forms of coping most used by health professionals in the primary care network of the Unified Health System, SUS, during the first semester of the COVID-19 pandemic. In Brazil, we have the Unified Health System, SUS. It's a public health service that guarantees universal, free, and comprehensive access to the health services for the Brazilian and foreign population at three levels of care: primary, secondary, and tertiary. This is a picture about the unit, USF, in Piracicaba. Methodology. This is cross-sectional quantitative observational study with health professionals, doctors, nursing assistant, community health workers, dentists, and oral health dentists from 52 family health units of the primary care network of the city of Piracicaba, Brazil. Not every health unit had an oral health team, okay? This is one of the family health units of city, Santa Rosa 1. The data collection occurred between November 2020 and May 2021. I contacted the coordinators of 52 city units by phone to explain the research and extend an invitation to participate. 50 of them agreed to collaborate. I offered them the options of filling out the form via Google Form or in a print. I collected data from some units in person, while for others, I sent the forms by email and later retrieved them. Some units responded directly through the link. The process was complicated due to the lack of Wi-Fi in some units, which hindered the data collection, and the atmosphere was dense. The forms were completed after signing the consent form and approval from the ethics committee. Two self-administered questionnaires were used in a single document. First, socio-demographic data, gender, marital status, age, profession, time in public service, education, if you belong to the risk group. And second, the Folkman and the Lazarus coping inventory, which consists of 8 factors, where which one assesses the most frequently used coping strategy by the individual. Items were scored on a 4-point Likert scale. The chromates alpha significant for greater than 0.65. The Folkman-Lazarus scope inventory translated and adapted for the Portuguese, containing the following factors: F1, confrontation; F2, distancing; F3, self-control; F4, social support; F5, acceptance of responsibility. F8, escape avoidance. F7, problem solving. And F8, positive reprisal. Results and discussion. 198 health professionals made up the sample from a universe of 400 professionals. 9.9% of the sample was female. 26.8% belonged to the risk group. 48.5% had more than 10 years of public service. 49% had completed high school. 39.9% were between 30 and 40 years old. 56.1% had partner, and 49.2% were community health workers. There are figure, sample distribution by professional categories. Community health works, the major. Yeah, I'm writing another article about them. After them, nursing assistant, dental assistant, doctors, then, nurse, doctor, dentist, and others. The table 1 of the most frequently employed strategies, the following factors are salient. Positive reprisal, problem solving, escape avoidance, and social support. In table 2, this table contrasts healthcare professionals who self-reported as belonging to the COVID-19 risk group with those who did not. Yes, no? The following factor as emphasizing with respect to the most prevalent strategies. See, here, escape avoidance was significantly elevated in this group, okay? Other points. A quantitative descriptive study carried out with 29 health professionals and the first responders showed that seeking support and information and personal care are important in controlling anxiety. Social support in my research was significant, but not much compared to the other factors that stood out more. Coping study carried out with 22 different healthcare professionals from the hospital area in the Federal District. Positive reprisal, social support, and self-control. They are more important in this study, in that study. Positive reprisal coping strategies are more common in health professionals due to the daily frustration they experience at work, in which they seek greater emotional balance by reframing situations. Work exhaustion and the compromised mental health of workers have negative effects on themselves as well as on patients. Studies on coping in health professionals at the beginning of the pandemic were scarce, especially in primary care. Between the most of May and September 2020, the Ministry of Health implemented the teleconsultation channel for COVID-19, TeleSUS, and the psychological teleconsultation service for health professionals involved in COVID care. And final considerations. Thus, professionals use the positive reappraisal, faith, creativity, new beliefs, and problem solving as their main strategies, which constitute adaptive form of coping. It is necessary for investing more research in the context of pandemics and coping in primary care as in other levels of care, which involves training works to develop skills to cope with stressful situations, very common in the health sector, providing better working conditions and salaries, so that the SUS can, based on the experience of COVID, prepare for future health crises. There are a few references. And if you want to know more, here is my contact info and the article. Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allen, for the presentation. So any questions from the audience side? Yes.
And the title in this presentation is Maternal Education Practices and the Child Behavioral Repertoire, a Comparison and the Prediction Study. What I'm presenting is in this publication. So, there are reports about school problems are very frequently fights and isolations. Behavior problems have been associated with multiple variables, sociodemographic variables, marital conflicts, maternal depression, parenting, and the social skills. The quality of marital relationships and their associations with parenting and child behavior have been addressed by several studies, such as associations between marital conflicts, negative parenting practices, and behavior problems. Associations between marital conflict and social skills. Marital conflicts predict in children deficit in social skills, in coping, and adjustment. The presence of marital conflicts was associated with family mental health problems. So, mental health problems impacting families and child behaviors, especially maternal depression, like behavior problems, internalizing and externalizing positive practice and the child behaviors. Maternal depression is associated with internalizing and externalizing problems, especially in the presence of the other risks, among which is negative parenting style and the marital conflicts. However, studies simultaneously investigating in biparental families, parenting practices, marital relationships, maternal depressions, and child behavior remain a gap in the literature. So, the objective was to verify associations between positive and negative parenting practices, marital relationships, social skills, and behavior problems among children from biparental families with and without maternal depression, and to identify the predictions effects of positive and negative parenting practice, marital relationship, children, social skills, and maternal depression. 4. Internalizing group, and comorbidity, internalizing and externalizing groups. A case study with a cross-section design was adopted to ensure the groups were homogeneous in sociodemographic characteristics. A total 35 mothers currently with depression and 35 without depression indicators participated in the study. The instruments used for data collection include patient health questionnaire, child behavior checklist, questionnaire for skillful responses, parenting social skills interview guide, marital relationship questionnaire. The variables from the clinical and non-clinical groups for indicators of depression were collected using Pearson's test, and the numerical variables were selected for the simple regression linear analysis was in performance, in which having indicators of behavior problems, only internalizing or only externalizing and externalizing comorbidities were the dependent variables. The results, in general, reveals maternal depression associated with marital relationships, positive and negative parenting, and the context variables. Positive practices and the contextual variables associated with social skills. Negative practices associated with behavior problems. In the depression group, there are these associations. And the non-depression group, there are these associations. In the linear regression, there are maternal depression and the marital relationship were found to influence externalized problems. Maternal depression and educational practices, negative and positive practices in deficit. Negative marital relationship, positive marital relationship deficit, and the social skill deficit, and the behavior compliance, influence, internalizing, externalizing problems. So, no variable, internalizing problems. The study highlights the importance of the maternal depression with parenting, marital interaction in relation to behavior problems and social skills. It provides evidence of the differential effects of the practice on different types of behavior problems. Therefore, the results suggest that there is a bidirectional influence between indicators of child behavior and education and the indicators of maternal behaviors. The higher the number of associated indicators of behavior problems and the higher the number of related dependent variables, including positive and negative parenting practice, positive and negative marital relationships, and children's social skills and complex of problems. The findings contribute to the identifications of a risk and protective factors specific to these problems, which can inform intervention and support to the development. The implication of these results includes the importance of encouraging positive educational practices with child behavior problems and lessen the effects of negative problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alessandra, for the presentation. So, any question from the audience side?
Porque foi 15 minutos de conversa, quando pessoas aí tendem aí um longo prazo, né? Um prazo aí de no mínimo de 5 a 10 anos para diagnosticar tal coisa mais assertivo, né? E às vezes costuma nem ser assertivo. Mas aí diagnosticou isso, e aí isso mudou minha caminhada, né? Porque quando você ouve uma coisa de um profissional aos 19 anos de idade, já tinha minha primeira filha, né? Então tudo isso veio à tona porque a sociedade ela cobra muito da saúde mental. Ela cobra muito da saúde mental e são pensados poucos recursos para que a saúde mental seja realmente digna de saúde mental, desse nome saúde mental. Então, o que acontece? E aí passou alguns anos e tudo, eu convivendo com isso, com esse problema, né, de ter esse diagnóstico tão rápido, de uma forma tão ruim que chegou até mim. Então, vou aqui para dentro aqui que está passando um carro. Porque aí, o que aconteceu? Então, fui para... Aí pensei, já que um profissional, né, da psiquiatria disse que eu sou doido, então eu sou doido mesmo. Então fui lá, fiz 4 tatuagens no rosto, logo após essa questão. Foi também no mesmo momento, né, que as coisas começaram a acontecer por um outro caminho. Se minha vida estava levando um rumo, então foi para outro patamar por causa dessa informação desse profissional, né, dessa atitude. E a partir daí tive experiência no Raul Soares, né, que era um modelo asilar na época ainda, né? Então, depois da chegada, né, dos serviços substitutivos, né, no SUS aqui, muita coisa melhorou para a saúde mental, né? As coisas começaram a ter uma outra visão a respeito, mas ainda peguei um pouco desse momento onde que era internação e a gente ter que ficar, né, no, no local internado e tudo mais. Só que quando eu fiquei 80 dias, né? Eu fiquei 80 dias no Hospital Raul Soares. Então, nesses 80 dias, foi uma coisa que até eu descobri que não tinha outros recursos, tive que usar da malandragem que aprendi na rua, né? Então, consegui uma conversa meio que ríspida, né? Vamos dizer assim, para nós compreender, com uma ideia meio que ríspida, a gente acabou que conseguiu a alta no outro dia depois dessa conversa. Então foi assim que eu passei minha experiência na saúde mental. E aí eu chego novamente no serviço substitutivo, né? E aí outro profissional dá um diagnóstico de transtorno bipolar tipo 1, né? E aí, a partir desse momento, acertei o remédio e continuei a tomar esse remédio. Foi quando eu consegui me organizar para eu levar a vida que eu levo hoje, né? Consegui estudar em psicologia, que sou estudante de psicologia, vou para o 8º período agora, né? Sou vice-coordenador, né, de uma associação nacional, Abrange, né? Sou vice-coordenador da Abrange Educação, né, que é o núcleo da Abrange Nacional, e tem diversas coisas fazendo. Eu cheguei, né, no consultório na rua, através de Daniele Vassalo, presente aí nas minhas falas, porque foi um divisor de águas aí, ela ter me aceito no consultório na rua, diante de todas as vivências, né, que eu tinha passado, ela viu uma potência no consultório na rua, e diante disso, pude chegar à Abrange Educação e outros lugares, E engraçado que na primeira semana, a primeira roda de conversa que eu participei da roda de conversa com Domi Siqueira, que esteja em um bom lugar, uma das referências na redução de danos aqui em Belo Horizonte, né? Então, e aí escrevemos esse artigo, com toda essa vivência que eu passei na saúde mental lá atrás. Eu passei 8 anos trabalhando na saúde mental, no consultório na rua, né? Trabalhei na região Centro-Sul e depois na regional Venda Nova, Pampulha, no final agora. Trabalhei também no BH de mãos dadas contra a AIDS, né? Num outro programa durante 1 ano também. E aí escrevemos esse artigo. A estratégia de recovery, ela diz de pessoas que já passaram por questões com saúde mental, de conseguir lidar um pouco melhor, ou muito melhor, vamos dizer assim, né? Muito melhor do que os profissionais que não têm esse tipo de vivência. Porque quando você está de um lado, né, de um lado da sociedade, como usuário, né, como sendo amarrado na cama para dormir, porque era considerado perigoso para as pessoas, só porque tinha uma K-47 no rosto tatuado, isso em 2009, certo? Então, e aí muita coisa acontecendo, muita, muita coisa acontecendo mesmo, e aí a gente se põe a pensar, né? Será que esses profissionais estão realmente capacitados para dar esse tipo de ideia, dar esse tipo de conversa a uma pessoa de 19 anos, depois outro vem e invalida, fala, não, você não tem isso, você tem isso. Então, né, acredito que através desses eventos, né, que igual eu estou participando agora, internacional aí, a gente consiga chegar às pessoas, né, com mais potência, por ser científico, por ser artigo científico. Outra coisa que eu gostaria de dizer, né, a redução de danos não é regulamentada no Brasil. Por que isso, cara? A gente trabalha na lógica da redução de danos, certo? A gente trabalha na lógica da redução de danos e não é regulamentado o profissional redutor de danos. Isso inviabiliza muita coisa para os profissionais. Isso não tem como continuar assim. Eu acredito que para a gente conseguir regulamentar essa profissão, a gente tem que investir em escrever artigo científico. Quando a gente provar cientificamente que as coisas são necessárias, que a redução de danos é necessário, certo? Que as coisas não é com o salário que a gente ganha aqui que o profissional redutor de danos vai conseguir viver sua vida toda. Não é assim, certo? As coisas têm que ser regulamentadas, tem que ser valorizado, não só na conversa, bater nas costas, falar, não, beleza, nós somos um bom profissional. Não é isso. Como é que você é um bom profissional, aí chega dia 7 do mês, você recebeu dia 5, dia 7, você já não tem mais dinheiro, mano, você já pagou suas contas, entendeu? Você não pode ter suas coisas. E se você não tem ninguém do seu lado, entendeu? Então a conversa é essa, a conversa é outro leve. Então a gente tem que escrever artigo científico, a gente tem que estar nesses espaços dizendo da profissão da redução de danos, certo? Da redução de danos em todo o contexto. E quando for dizer de criança e adolescente, a gente dizer de redução de vulnerabilidade, vamos reduzir a vulnerabilidade dessa galera, porque se a gente cuida antes, o depois, o prognóstico pode ser mais de boa, pode ser mais suave. Vamos cuidar das pessoas, mano, certo? Porque é uma coisa é os recursos serem usados, né, do jeito que é usado, do jeito que atualmente acontece, certo? A gente não está sendo enclausurado nos lugares, mas... E o tratamento, cara? Não é só não ser enclausurado, é não ser enclausurado, é ser bem tratado. Eu sou saúde mental e eu só quero ser bem tratado onde eu for, independente do lugar que eu for, entendeu? É a saúde mental que está aqui, é a saúde mental que está aqui, certo? Estou chegando, entendeu? Gostaria de deixar um apelo também, né, para as grandes universidades aí mundiais que quiserem conversar. Tem diversas coisas para escrever sobre recovery. Vamos, é, vamos dizer dessa estratégia, uma estratégia muito assertiva nos lugares que são valorizados. Porque num lugar que você não consegue se manter com a profissão, como que você se mantém? Eu tenho 3 filhos, uma de 17, uma de 3 anos e 5 meses e um de 1 ano e 8 meses, mano. Eu tenho que correr, agora eu trabalho de segunda a segunda para manter minha família. E eu estou feliz com isso, e é marcha, entendeu? Quero convidar aos estudiosos de Harvard, quero convidar o pessoal de Yale, entendeu? Igual o Mark Napoli está lá, um salve para ele, entendeu? Quero convidar o pessoal de MIT, vamos escrever sobre recovery, vamos escrever sobre redução de danos, porque se a gente provar cientificamente que a gente é capaz de receber um salário digno, a gente vai conseguir regulamentar e vai conseguir, além de regulamentar, suprir as coisas para as famílias, mano. E se não quiser ter família, suprir as coisas para si próprio, mano. Ninguém tem que trabalhar, entendeu? Do jeito que trabalha, entrando em cena de uso, entendeu? Várias vezes já entrei numa loca. As últimas agora, sentaram o tiro para cima da van, tivemos que pular fora. Quem que viu? O redutor de danos que viu, que falou, ô, é tiro, pula, vamos embora. Entendeu? A equipe nem identificou, entendeu? É o redutor de danos, é necessário. Então, vamos ter redutores de danos em todos os espaços da saúde pública de BH, de Minas Gerais e do Brasil. Então, fica aqui minha fala, o meu apelo. Gostaria de dizer que tem a Purity Skateboard, certo? Temos vários projetos. Fiz campeonato de skate semana passada, com foco de atrair criança e adolescente para o Day Life, para a life que é skateboard, entendeu? Porque o skate que me salvou, eu amarrado numa cama lá, certo? Eu pensando em manobra de skate, fugir do manicômio para correr um campeonato de skate, cheguei lá certo? Com um negócio pregado aqui do Odol que eu tinha tomado. Ninguém entende essas fitas, mano. Só quem passa, só quem é saúde mental que passa e que está ligado. Então fica meu apelo aí, vamos regulamentar a redução de danos. Pelo amor de Deus, hein? Obrigado aí pelo espaço e eu termino minha fala aí agradecendo primeiramente a Deus, sempre, primeiramente. E olha que eu passei 34 anos sem botar fé. Estou com 35 agora. Esse foi o ano que eu botei fé em Deus e as coisas estão acontecendo. Certo? Então, vão que vão. Obrigado, família. Obrigado, Raila. Obrigado a todos. Domi Siqueira, Roberto Soares, Flávio Ricardo. Esses caras aí, mano, sem palavras. Thank you. It's good. Thank you. Conferência. Valeu.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno, for the presentation. So I request you to leave your email address in the chat box. So if anyone is having
who self-report obstetric violence in Puerto Rico for the year 2016 to 2019. So I will speak in English, but my first language is Spanish, so I will try my best, okay? As an introduction, the violence as a social determinant of health, the circumstances in which people are born, grow up, live, work, age, including the health system, are the social determinants of health. Two sets of determinants have been defined, structural and intermediaries. Structural ones include income, education, gender, ethnic group, and social cohesion. Intermediaries are living conditions, working conditions, food availability, population behavior, and the health system. The term structural violence is applicable in those situations in which basic human needs are somehow put in danger or harm as the result of a process of social stratification and not necessarily through direct violence. Structural violence is caused by process of social structuring from those occurring at the level of the system world to those occurring within the family or in inter-individual interactions and is present in an institutional way. Franco, in 2016, identifies the medicalization of health as one of the structural conditions of violence that occurs in health system and services. So the obstetric violence, according to the World Health Organization, obstetric violence is a phenomenon that occurs when women experience disrespectful, abusive, and negligent treatment during prenatal care, childbirth, and or postpartum by their health professionals who attend them. Boren conducted a systemic review of mixed methods of women mistreatment during childbirth in health facilities worldwide. The review encompassed 65 studies from 34 countries and allowed the findings to be organized into 7 categories. The authors recommended use these categories as tools to measure the prevalence of obstetric violence events. So there are the 7 categories. They are physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, stigma and discrimination, failure to meet professional standards of care, poor relationship between women and health professionals, and health system conditions and limitations. So in the background, in the South America, there are many countries that sanction violence against women in childbirth. In 1997, Paraguay; in 1998, Bolivia, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela; in 2004, Argentina. So there was very events. In 2007, the organic law, the term obstetric violence arises in Venezuela. In 2015, the Obstetric Violence Observatory born in Chile. And in 2016, Comprehensive Protection of Women Act recognized obstetric violence as a form of abuse in Paraguay. In the North America, the country that sanctioned violence against women in childbirth, Panama, Nicaragua in 1996, Dominican Republic in 1997, and in Mexico in 1998. And some events in 2014, the World Health Organization recognized the disrespectful treatment to women in childbirth, and in 2015, the United Nations Organization developed goals sustainable by 2030. But here in Puerto Rico, we have in 2006, the Law 156, accompaniment during labor, birth, and postpartum. In 2008, the project to create a law to gain access to cesarean statistics. This project was voted by Governor Aníbal Acevedo Vilá. In 2010, project to create midwifery examination board in Puerto Rico. 2013, the previous project is presented again without success. In 2016, the Law 200 to amend the Law 156, the Puerto Rico Obstetric Violence Observatory is found. In 2017, Senate Bill 363 to create a law to access information on birth statistics in Puerto Rico. So several events occur. Also, bills have been presented to make obstetric violence visible as a public health problem, but without success. The justification for this study, the increase in the execution of labor practices that allow to start, accelerate, finish, regulate, or monitor the physiological process of labor. The medicalization of the birth process tends to weaken women's ability to give birth and negatively affects the delivery experience. The World Health Organization states that to prevent and eradicate mistreatment and disrespect in childbirth in health centers worldwide, it is necessary to implement concrete actions, highlighting among them more research on the subject. So the methodology to this study was an analytical cross-sectional study where we divide in 2 groups. The group where have more manifestation of obstetric violence and the fewer manifestation of obstetric violence, and we have the mother characteristic and the baby characteristic in both groups. The sampling was no probabilistic sampling by convenience, and we used the platform SurveyMonkey to do the questionnaire. So we have inclusion criteria, be female, cisgender, 21 years or older, have had at least 1 birth during the period from January 1st, 2016 to December 31, 2019, and that her last delivery was in Puerto Rico. And the exclusion criteria: be a woman under 21 years old, the last birth was not in a health institution, or their last pregnancy ended in a miscarriage. So the questionnaire was developed by Boren in 2019, validated in Ghana, Guinea, Myanmar, and Nigeria, and culturally adapted to Puerto Rico by the researcher. The questionnaire was divided into 5 sections: the social demographic data of the participants, the question related to the most recent delivery during this period, dichotomous question related to the pre-delivery process, dichotomous question related to the process during the delivery, and dichotomous question related to the postpartum process. So the independent variables, we have the mother characteristic that like age, marital status, academic preparation, employment status, annual income, area of residence, type of residence, health plan, and birth story. The baby characteristic was the birth weight, birth measurement, gestational age, breastfeeding, respiratory complications, jaundice, admission to the NICU, and other associated factors like the month of birth and the year of birth. And in the dependent variable, we have the 6 categories. We exclude the sexual abuse. So we use physical abuse, verbal abuse, stigma and discrimination, the failure to meet professional standard of care, poor relationship between women and health professionals, and health system conditions and limitations. So in the results and the discussion of this study, the sampler, we have the social demographic characteristic, where we have 49% of women with 21 to 30 years, 67% was married. So 37% have a bachelor degree, and a 37% also have a master or a doctorate degree. The 42% work in a private company employee, and 39% have the annual income. So in the residence area, 59% live in urban areas, 46% have her own residence, and 58% have a private plan. The responses for each item had a sample size of 2,072 participants. So in the categories of obstetric violence, before childbirth, we can see 91% the failure to meet professional standard of care. And in this category, we include the consent to do any process. 60% have a poor relationship between women and health professionals, and 50% the health system conditions and limitations. Also, 34% of the participants say that receive a verbal abuse. During the childbirth, we have an increase of the physical abuse. We have a frequency of 113. So in this area, we include the cesarean section and the episiotomies. So 96% also have failure to meet professional standard of care. So we have, again, the consent to do any process. There's 56% poor relationship between women and health professionals, and 53% the health system conditions and limitations. After the childbirth, we can see that the percent stays in failure to meet professional standard of care. We have also a 92%, 59% in poor relationship between women and health professionals, and 55% in health system conditions and limitations. So continuing with the bivariate analysis, a binomial logistic regression was performed. The dependent variable was exposure to manifestation of obstetric violence. We can see the physical abuse, the OR with the health plan, and the poor relationship between women and health professionals with the academic preparation. So we create the obstetric violence index, and we first analyze the frequency of occurrence of violence in each of the 6 categories. Then the categorical risk index was created, which provides a ranking relationship between categories. This was done using intervals of 2 categories of manifestation of obstetric violence for each classification in the obstetric violence index. Therefore, it was classified as absence where there were no manifestation of obstetric violence in any of the categories. It was classified as mild violence when there were manifestations of obstetric violence in 1 or 2, moderate when there were manifestations in 3 or 4 categories, and finally was classified in severe obstetric violence when there was manifestation in 5 or 6 of the categories. New categorical variable was created where those participants who had no obstetric violence or mild violence were classified in the least exposed group, and the most exposed group were those participants who had moderate violence and severe violence. To examine the statistical difference in the characteristic of the mother and the most exposed group compared with the least exposed group, the chi-square test was performed. The test results for all maternal characteristics were not significant. This means that there is no statistically significant difference between the characteristic of the mother on both groups. A multinomial logistic regression was performed to estimate the magnitude of association between the independent variables and the obstetric violence index. The model was not significant, therefore the characteristics of the model do not affect the obstetric violence index. So, in terms of the sample profile of women who self-report obstetric violence, we can conclude that none of the statistical models show significant results for any of the categories. This implies that no matter the characteristic of the mother, they do not affect the manifestation of obstetric violence. However, it was observed that 74% of the women participants have academic baccalaureate or higher. 99% of the women self-report at least one manifestation of obstetric violence in any of the categories. This implies that at higher academic preparation, women have 3.16 probability of identifying manifestation in the category of poor relationship between women and health professionals, but this fact is a proactive factor for the category of physical violence. Similarly, participants with private plans have a 3.73 chance of self-reporting in the category of physical violence. It is important to emphasize that physical violence includes manifestations such as cesarean sections and episiotomies. So the recommendations from social work field is legislation is recommended to enact laws that improve health services for women, ensuring that their rights are fulfilled before, during, and after childbirth. Educate the general population about obstetric violence and its different manifestations in order to raise awareness of the issue and prevent it. Train health professionals and educate on best practices in the provision of health services to women and infants. Promote the participation of women in education and support programs during pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum, and mobilize resources to make education and support programs from pregnant women accessible to all populations. There are the references. If you have any question, you can email me. I will write the email in the chat. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria, for the presentation. I hope the audience have learned more about it. So any question from the audience side?
role multiplicity. First, I would like you to present a definition of the word stress by the Royal Spanish Academy. It says, tension caused by overwhelming situation that results in psychosomatic reaction or psychological disorder, sometimes of severe. Stress has three stages of response. First is the alarm, second, the resistance, and by the end, exhaustion. The individual requires a period to recover, and this period will depend on the duration of the exposure to the stressful situation. Stress is not a bad or can be not bad. It helps us to protect ourselves for danger situation. But if it's a long period and we don't have this time to recover, is when it starts to be a problem. The International Labour Organization defines the occupational stress as the stress determined by the organization where one works, the job design, the employment relationships resulting from work demands that exceed capacities, resources, and or needs of the worker. If a temporary leave is prolonged or become permanent, the cost increase due to the loss of the person's experience and knowledge. Therefore, the organization will have the necessity to train the new worker. The World Health Organization includes the burnout in the International Classification of Disease as an occupational phenomenon in 2019. Burnout is defined as the syndrome results from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed, characterized by three dimensions: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and low personal accomplishment. Burnout in professors has a negative impact in their substantial activities, which are guide, teach, and contribute for a positive change in society. We have a long time about the instrument using to measure the burnout. We will start in 1974 with Fraudenberger used for the first time the term burnout. Then in 1981, Maslach and Jackson designed and published the first instrument to measure burnout related to teachers. They called their instrument MBI. In 2013, Arquero and Donoso used the instrument from Maslach and Jackson, but they include the researcher role in this evaluation. Their instrument was called MBI. In 2016, Ilaja and Reyes did research to measure the burnout, including educational, researcher, and linking activities using the MBI. Having all this, and because of the MBI instrument, has been employed in over 90 of the empirical studies related with this topic. I designed the Burnout doing now. This instrument was validated by experts, then a pilot, then applied with the Northwest various university in Mexico, and now the result I'm presenting today to you. The methodology was followed for this research was we consider a faculty of a public university of the Northwest Mexico. The population of this faculty is 117 full-time professors. Considering a confidence level of 90% and a margin of error of 10%, our sample calculated and result we got 44. That was our target. It was a non-experimental cross-sectional research, and the instrument used was the Burnout doing excuse me. Its acronym is based on Spanish. Docencia educational, in investigación for research, and ad for administración administrative. Constructor considered was the educational role, research role, and administrative role. Dimensions: emotional exhaustion, dispersonalization, and personal accomplishment. Like a type scale was used, and alpha Croban coefficient was considered. For the participant who could be sincere in their responses, the instrument was applied online, and they have the opportunity to respond any in time during the period that was open, the link available, the link. It was no way to track who answered who or what. That was important to create this safe environment so they can be sincere. That is very important. For software to process the data was used at SPSS version 22 and the Microsoft Excel. The reliability for international consistency was using a Croban alpha coefficient, and our results had in a very strong level. We can see in this table a comparison of results for research previously, and we can see our alpha Croban coefficient. We got good numbers. To make more visual the results, design a color code where green means no burnout syndrome, the yellow is a medium level of burnout syndrome, and the red color means a high level of burnout syndrome. I did a resume. The next slide I will present this table, but to explain you how I fold the numbers of the next table, I took the highest percent for each dimension, and depending of the color for the high is the color that you will see in the table, the summary table. It's important to have in mind that the ideal scenario will be all three dimensions are green. This is the summary table. We have the three dimension and the three constructs. educational role, research role, and administrative role, and a general results. We can see that 62 full-time professors participate in this research, answering the instrument, and was on 2022 applied the instrument. With the color code, we can see fast that the administrative role is the first or the main that is inducing the presence of the syndrome burnout on the high level on these professors. And the educational role is having less, little less, but having just one in a red color. Remember, for a professor, be a professor to teach a class. The main activities, the substantial activities that make a professor being a professor. Incidence factors we found was the job insecurity or not having a tenure. This make worry the professor if the next semester will have the job or not. If he goes speak and say what he thinks might make in jeopardy their job. So not having this security at job can induce the syndrome. Also, professor age. Now we have different generation working as co-workers, as co-teachers, and having different students. So it's becoming a challenge. The workload sometimes is not equal for all the professors in the same team working. The manage of soft skills, and of course the administrative activities as we saw on the table before. For conclusion, we have this table on the resume and I leave it with the numbers, but it's important to see the colors, the administrative roles, and having this multiplicity of roles induce the presence on the burnout. If we see the account for general, we don't have any green. That's very something to take care to put attention in that. Velasco in 2019 mentioned the reconciliation between work and emotional state is a journey of individuals to achieve emotional balance. In 2018 was published that teachers are facing demands to integrate new technologies into their learning. We have new skills to learn. We have to learn new technologies, how to teach, to learn in this 21st century. Also in 22, the World Health Organization published key facts about history that I saw directly related to this topic today. And the first one was poor work environment, including discrimination and inequality, excessive workloads, low job control, and job insecurity pose a risk to mental health. Second, globally, an estimate of 12 billion working days are lost every year to depression and anxiety at the cost of $1 trillion per year in lost productivity. Decent work is good for mental health. We have 24 hours each day. I know we will have more, but the reality is we just have 24 hours. So achieving the highest standard in our activities may necessitate give up something, which could include our health, our family, and or productivity at work. All of us should take care of ourselves and the people in every organization. These are the references used for this presentation. Thank you and have a great day.
Okay, I'd like to send my gratitude to Dr. Luz Del Cancelo for the presentation. So, if you
are suffering from postpartum depression, and it has a severe impact on maternal well-being and also for infant health. The systematic review here aims to evaluate the efficacy of breastfeeding with reducing the risk of postpartum depression. In this method, we have done a systematic research, and our database that we have selected was PubMed. We did Cochrane and PsycInfo database for like 2021 to 2024. We included the PRISMA guideline. We assessed the impact of breastfeeding on postpartum depression. We also looked at secondary factors like how long, how often women breastfeed, and different breastfeeding patterns to see how they affected postpartum depression. And we'll discuss about this in detail in the results section. The studies include reproductive age women, original research article, and those assessing the relationship between breastfeeding and postpartum depression. Here in the result, we concluded from the papers that we have searched from 2021 to 2024 that total 64 full text articles were found that 28 studies met the inclusion criteria. The studies included cross-sectional studies, prospective studies, cohort studies, randomized control trial with sample size ranging from 61 participants to 71,448 participants. We found that exclusive breastfeeding is associated with lower postpartum depression, reduces the risk of postpartum depression, and showed a protective effect against postpartum depression. We found that early initiation and longer duration of breastfeeding were a protective factor. However, some studies did report additional factors such as maternal stress and other socioeconomic status also influence the relationship. Here, from this study, what we are concluding is the systematic review supports breastfeeding has having a positive effect on postpartum depression. Exclusive breastfeed significantly reduces the risk of postpartum depression, while stopping breastfeeding within 6 months can negatively affect maternal well-being. Therefore, sustaining exclusive breastfeed for the first 6 months of postpartum is essential in promoting it through comprehensive education and social support. The keywords that we use for this systematic review was postpartum depression, breastfeeding, exclusive breastfeeding, maternal health, mental health, and systematic review. Now, what do we understand as postpartum depression? And how many people on an estimate are having postpartum depression? We estimate like 15 to 20% of women experiencing postpartum depression can it severely affect they impact their mental well-being, their day-to-day life, their sleep pattern, and how they respond to things. And also it all negatively affect the infant well-being. So here studies estimate that up to 15 to 20% women experience PPD, which severely affect their quality of life, like we have discussed. And it ranges from mild to severe intensity, like in the symptoms of persistent sadness, anxiety, fatigue, which can hinder a mother's ability to take care for her newborn and herself. There have been studies indicating that shown have long-lasting effect on maternal and child health, negatively impacting it. The burden of postpartum depression on healthcare system is substantial, necessitating effective need for prevention and interventional strategies. Now, as we know, breastfeeding is widely recognized as a critical component for maternal and infant health. The WHO and the American Academy of Pediatrics recommend exclusive breastfeed for the first 6 months, which will help individual or up till 2 years. Breastfeeding is associated with numerous benefits like enhancing immune protection, reducing the risk of certain infection, improve cognitive development in infant. For mom, it's helps with faster postpartum recovery, decreases the risk of certain cancer, and foster emotional bonding with baby. Here in this, we are trying to understand the relationship between breastfeeding and postpartum depression and how the frequency, how often the impact of it, and also the comparison of feeding pattern and the relationship to breastfeeding will be looked upon. What is our methodology? Like discussed, we use 3 databases for systematic review and meta-analysis guideline with Prisma. We used a search strategy, as you can see here, for looking out for the papers, searching them. The search strategy we used for PubMed was breastfeeding or lactations or maternal nursing and postpartum depression or postnatal or depression natal or postpartum mood disorder. We use similar keywords for different other databases. Here, the primary aim for this was to find out the efficacy of breastfeeding in reducing the risk of postpartum depression, and a secondary aim were to highlight the various feeding types and their relationship to postpartum depression. Here, as you can see, this is a Prisma flow chart of showing how many papers we have seen. So the record for the database showed the PubMed, we extracted 290 papers, Cochrane, we had 133, PsycInfo, we have 116. And then after screening the papers, the number of articles that we got, including all the inclusion and exclusion criteria for the paper, was 64. And after that, we have included the number of paper was 28 after thorough manual evaluation of this. Now, coming to the results section, what are we trying to state from this paper and what are we trying to achieve? This topic is very close to me because I have seen my sister undergoing postpartum depression, and this was not addressed by her primary care or her gynecologist. And I believe that the psychiatrist should also be involved in the first initial evaluations for postpartum depression or any woman who has delivered a baby. So this is the main goal of the study. And in this results section, as you can see, we talked about the Prisma flowchart. The study characteristics will be, we included all the names of the author, the year of publication, the country that it was conducted in, the study design, the sample size, and the prevalence of PPD. The years, like we have discussed, from 2021 to 2014, the location where it was conducted in different locations worldwide. Most of the studies were in Europe. The number of articles were 11 from there. And then USA and China were 3. And then Canada, Japan, and Taiwan were 2. And Bangladesh, Ethiopia, India, Myanmar, Mexico, and UK was 1. So in this paper, we have cross-sectional studies and the number of articles were 12, prospective study, the number of articles were 8, cohort study, the number of articles were 4, and then the randomized control trial study, the number of articles were 2. And then the population characteristic, the sample size, like we have discussed, is this. Here in this, while reviewing these papers in detail, we have also concluded the impact of postpartum depression. In a collection of 14 studies examining the impact of breastfeeding status on postpartum, 7 specifically compared exclusive breastfeeding to non-exclusive breastfeeding. And here, after running the meta-analysis or p-value, it shows the p-value was less than 0.001, which is statistically significant. So we see the relationship of exclusive breastfeeding reduces the rate of getting diagnosed with postpartum depression than compared to breastfeeding. Moving on, we also compared various feeding pattern and the relation. 7 studies examined different feeding patterns and their association with postpartum depression. We had a reference paper from Schumann from 2022 revealed that formula feeding was associated with screening positive for postpartum depression and major depression symptoms compared to breast milk feeding. So people who also do formula feeding are at higher risk of getting diagnosed with postpartum depression than compared to people who breastfeed. That is also one of the things that we have concluded from the study. Examining the impact of breastfeeding, specifying the duration. The duration of the breastfeeding has a significant effect of postpartum depression, with 5 studies aiming to highlight the protective effect of breastfeeding, and 1 study discussing the timeline of initiation of breastfeeding. According to the study by Turner in 2024, breast milk feeding at 3 months decreased the risk of postpartum depression at 6 months. It was also noted that breastfeeding at 12 months decreased the odds of postpartum depression at 1 year. So here they are showing like the longer the duration of the breastfeeding is, it has been helpful in preventing them from postpartum depression. We found that mothers who initiate breastfeeding within an hour of delivery had a significantly reduced risk of developing postpartum depression, and the p-value was for this is 0.0011. Frequency of breastfeeding and relationship to postpartum. For this, we had 2 studies by Guntz in 2021 and Sivas by 2024 highlights the association between breastfeeding and postpartum risk. Found that frequent breastfeeding was associated with decreased depressive symptoms at 6 months, and the p-value for this was less than 0.00. Sorry, the p-value was less than 0.001. Moreover, infant night waking was associated with higher level of postpartum depression symptoms at 6 months postpartum. However, infant was associated similarly in Sivas observed a negative linear relationship between the number of breastfeeding sessions per day and the score on the 10th day for postpartum, indicating that more frequent breastfeeding sessions were linked to lower postpartum symptoms. The modulator of the association between breastfeeding and postpartum. One of the included paper by Howard from 2022 found that at 6 months, postpartum mothers who breastfeed had significantly lower postpartum depression score compared to those who did not. Though this relationship was modulated by maternal pre-pregnancy BMI, showing that BMI plays a crucial role in postpartum depression outcomes. And then Kosakova's 2022 noted a variable that predicted depression, postpartum depression among mothers who only breastfed, which came out to be maternal satisfaction, intracycle stress, and belief in infant on on scheduling the patient for regular breastfeed. And then we have few more papers who supported the same thing, like the source of breastfeeding. And then one of the papers also highlighted that the woman has to get like a breastfeeding education, how often they have to do it, what they have to do it, and that also significantly reduces the risk of postpartum depression. And then I'm so sorry. Yeah, moving to the discussion part here in this, postpartum depression has adverse maternal and infant outcome. So in this systemic review, we are talking about the relationship between them. Here in this, as you see, the discussion is about breastfeeding more often, increased frequency, education about this, socioeconomic status, having social support. All of these help women for reducing postpartum depression. In regards, robust social support, as we have discussed, network and targeted interventions such as educational program and perinatal mental health are essential for mitigating postpartum depression risk. Comprehensive postpartum care services, including access to mental health professionals, counseling, support groups, and resources for managing postpartum risk. Stress are crucial for mother identified with positive postpartum depression screening. Addressing socioeconomic factors and providing comprehensive breastfeeding support can significantly reduce the risk of postpartum depression. Collaboration with community organizations and mental health agency can extend support services beyond hospital. Improving access to mental health resources for mother facing barriers such as transportations or insurance coverage also holds a crucial role. Um, I I feel really here in United States, it's a compulsory rule to do postpartum depression screening. So when a baby goes for a vaccination, the mother goes for a regular checkup. The woman is also regularly checked or followed up on the postpartum depression. So postpartum screening plays a very vital role in diagnosing it. If the patient is not diagnosed, then the percentage, like the overall percentage in the world that we are saying 15 to 20%, I still feel that is not the correct number because there's so many women who does not undergo any diagnosis or any assessment for postpartum depression. So addressing these issues are very important so that we have the right number in our statistics. And once we have it, we have to learn how to tackle it. How to tackle it is giving them counseling support, making sure they see a psychiatrist if they are in need, and making sure they have the social support because we know men in few of the papers, like when we were reviewing, we also see they need social support at home. Having a supportive family, when they are breastfeeding, take the baby away, give them some rest. That also plays a very crucial role. And especially in nowadays time when everyone is tackling their own stresses, they're working, they're looking after their family, the baby. So social support also plays a very vital role in these things. Now, the strength and limitations. While acknowledging the limitation of the studies included in our review, such as predominance of cross-sectional design and the lack of differentiation between various cutoff points for depression assessment, it's essential to highlight the meticulousness with which our review examined the association between breastfeeding and reduction of postpartum depression globally. While causality cannot be interfered from our review, the consistent finding across multiple studies suggesting a protective effect of breastfeeding against PPD offers valuable insight. Despite these limitations, our review provided valuable insight into the relationship between breastfeeding and postpartum risk reduction, as noted by the latent research in the past 4 years, by focusing specifically on whether breastfeeding reduces it. This approach allowed us to compile a comprehensive overview of the current knowledge regarding the association between them. By recognizing these limitations and strengths, our review contribute to the ongoing dialogue surrounding breastfeeding practices and mental health outcome. What are we concluding from this study? Exclusive breastfeeding mainly holds significant value in mitigating the risk of postpartum depression. Premature cessation of exclusive breastfeeding before 6 months postpartum possesses a considerable threat to maternal well being. Hence, it's a crucial to sustain exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months after childbirth. Moreover, it has demonstrated enduring advantage in reducing the likelihood of postpartum depression for up to a year. Maternal attitude and factors linked to breastfeeding, such as maternal stress and social engagement during the breastfeeding, are some variables that can enhance bonding and alleviate and ease maternal stress. Thus, advocating for breastfeeding, primarily through comprehensive education, social support, is pivotal in fostering this correlation. So this is one of the posters that we have presented in one of the conferences highlighting the efficacy of how frequent breastfeeding, how prolonged breastfeeding would help in reducing postpartum depression. And we have all the authors stated in this, that is Garima, Saloni, Komalpreet, Lida, Lalita, myself, Tejaswini, JB, Tejasvi, and Zishan, and then Shailesh. I would also like to say that we have no conflict of interest with anyone and no funding was taken. Thank you everyone for giving me this valuable time. I really appreciate and it's a pleasure to be in this conference, listening from all the colleagues who are well experienced in the field. It's a beautiful experience. Thank you again. If anyone have any questions, I'll be happy to take it now.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So, any questions?